So thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. It's so great to see all of you. And whoops, let me just start over. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. That was a dress rehearsal. So thank you everyone for coming. We had a great great question from a student, and it's come up a few times, and it in some ways seems like a simple question, but then as we looked at it, it really is one that requires more than just a quick answer on Instagram. So we wanted to do a little longer exploration of the idea of why we practice for others. In other words, we all know that when we do the closing chant in Ashtanga Yoga, part of that, the ending part of that, is that we are really offering the good that has come from the practice and all goodness to others.
Yeah, may all beings be happy.
Yeah. All beings in all realms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those of you who have participated with us or with other teachers in Buddhist studies, that's a big part of any Buddhist practice, is that we have our practice and we finish it, and then when it's over, we offer the good that has come from that practice, that it may benefit others. And it's very helpful when you do that to imagine a particular person or a group of people that you can dedicate your practice to or offer the good from the practice. But it can also become sort of like everything, we talk about this often, like everything, it can just become a sort of ritualistic thing that you do where you don't really embody it. You don't really feel what you mean when you're saying, I'm offering this practice to others, the goodness that has come from it. And then the question arises is, why are you doing that? Why is that part of the instruction? And why is that part of the tradition? And in part, it is just a gesture of generosity, the reminder within ourselves that it feels good and it feels whole and it feels wholesome to be generous rather than to cling onto things. So it's a gesture of generosity, and it's also a gesture of non-attachment. And non-attachment is something, again, that can become sort of a rote thing that we do. I'm going to not be attached. But in particular, this kind of non-attachment is the non-attachment to your self-story, to the small self, to the fabricated story of who you are, that I am doing my practice and it is mine, I, me, and mine. All of those little stories that we live with day in and day out, which are part of what humans do, those stories of I, me, and mine create this sort of container of self that is how we function in some ways in the world, and it's a true thing that we are ourselves as somewhat separate. But the more we fall into the illusion of those stories, the more separate and the more sort of unchanging we tend to see ourselves as being. And so that's being able to offer the practice to others allows us to let go of those stories a little bit. And we all know also that the stories of self that create this feeling of separateness, that's really the root of avidya. It's the root. The stories come out of avidya, which is the idea of misunderstanding interconnectedness and feeling that you are separate rather than you are part of something bigger than yourself. And out of that comes the ego and these stories. So what we really try to do when we offer the benefit of the practice to others is that we try to wake up and be present with not only the residue from the practice and the fullness of the practice, but wake up to the idea that our practice is not something that is ours alone.
Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes I practice, and it's basically I'm doing it for me.
Yeah,
I want
I've
out of here.
noticed that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's more like I'm practicing because I want to be happy.
Yeah,
And I want to like get out of here, or leave this world behind with all of its, swarms of difficult beings and things. And I think, that's sometimes a lot of yoga happens that way.
yeah.
For a lot of people.
And I think it's really important to ask yourself as you start contemplating this question of why we would offer the goodness of the practice to others, to ask yourself what brings you to the mat, what brought you to yoga in the very beginning. Maybe it was, that you were wanting to get enlightened and you heard that might work, or maybe you were, you just had a stiff back and you thought that would work, or maybe you saw someone you were interested in and you thought, well, maybe I'll meet them if I go to yoga. So, these are all these things that draw us into the yoga room. But then what is it that draws you back, that has you coming back time and again? And sometimes it's just a matter of discipline that brings you back.
Mm-hmm.
But very often, even if most of the time your practice is, as Richard was saying, my practice for me, so I'm going to be happy, much of the time people come back because at some class or at some practice somewhere they have had, and many of us probably have experienced this, through the practice, during the practice, a moment of something that is indescribable, of connecting in such a deep way to something that you feel is essentially part of your essence, part of something that is so familiar you can't put words on it, but that it is something that is part of you, that and it is, as you feel that feeling, if you happen to notice that, what actually is going on is that your small self story of who you believe yourself to be in any given moment, even my practice, that has started to dissolve. And in an embodied sense, through your breath, through your physical body, your heart and your mind, in that embodied sense, you are literally, viscerally experiencing interconnectedness. And I think that's
it just
when
happens sometimes. It's like you think, well, then when you think about it, it's like you take a photo of it with your brain, and then you think, oh, this is how I can recreate it. And sometimes but it can be, you can kind of create the circumstances. And that's kind of an interesting process.
Yeah.
But it's almost like we stumble into, like, it's amazing. And you can't explain it. And even though you will try.
And it really is.
Vibrates.
It really is this experience, the direct experience of interconnectedness. And when, if you think back to the idea of avidya, or the root of suffering as being separateness, the misperception of us, yourself, as being separate. one of the things that draws us into yoga is this spontaneous thing that happens. And it's not only yoga, it can happen in meditation, it can happen in chanting, it can happen out in nature, where the boundaries of who you have made yourself to be in your story, in your mind, those boundaries dissolve. And there is a feeling sense of sort of freedom and almost bliss. And if you think about it and feel into it, it really is this feeling of being interconnected. And back to the idea of why we practice for others is that when you feel that in your bones, that sense of interconnectedness, you have the mental awareness and the physical awareness and the heartfelt sense that because we are all in this together, we're all interconnected in a very deep way. If you are doing something like your practice and holding it for yourself, it's like you are, since others are part of you, you are holding back from part of yourself what really will make the whole more happy or more functional. So I did not push record, but I will record. We have it recording up here.
Recording in progress.
We have it recorded elsewhere. So thank you.
Oh.
So the idea that we are all profoundly interconnected is really what we experience when the yoga is working. And one of the images that really talks about that and that allows us to feel that sense of interconnectedness is the net of Indra. And we wanted to just talk a little about that because it really sheds light on this idea of why we practice for others and what that has to do with karma, with connecting, and with a sense of belonging.
Yeah, so the Indra Jal, or the what's often called the jeweled net of Indra, is where, and we experience that if in your own body. And if you imagine, I like to imagine a jeweled net in the skin, kind of like octopus skin or something. And the quality of the jeweled net of Indra is that it's an interwoven mesh, which is sometimes called a tantra, and at each intersection of things, there's a jewel. And if you actually just let go, if you look into the jewel, you'll start to see that it reflects all of the other jewels down all of the other paths, because it'll go to the next intersection and that'll be reflected, but that intersection reflects the jewels in all of the other intersections. And then, and it's at least 3-dimensional. No, it must be 4 or 5, anyway, 10-dimensional. And when you actually start to feel in your body the jeweled net, it's remember, like your skin is vibrant, and you're starting to feel into the front, the back, to the left, to the right, to the up, to the down, to the past, to the future, to,
inside, outside.
Inside, yeah. And all of the different directions in more detail. You're starting to you automatically go, you let go, because if you let go, then you start to see the jewels. If you hold on and start to look and you start to see sense objects, then you're caught in the net. And so there are times historically, according to mythology, when Indra's net was not necessarily a jeweled net, but it became more of a thing that people would clasp onto. And so I can review that story very briefly.
That's good.
So anyway, long time ago, and this is all according to, the Yoga Vasishta and then the Puranas and endlessly complex and funny stories. Indra and the gods were in kind of a relationship with demons, and it was a functional, just like in which, the gods were the good guys, and they would support things like supported the environment. They supported the environment in a subtle mental sense, in a electronic sense, in a cosmic sense, as well as in the earth sense. And the demons were simply their own shadows. And so the gods were, if they had this ideal of, well, I'm doing good, then somehow in their own body they would feel the shadow, like of that which they weren't identifying with. Or like, I'm a good guy, and then all of a sudden the bad becomes a shadow side in the Jungian sense. But then what happened one day was probably historically necessary. There was this fellow named Shiva. Shiva is known for good dancing, but his job is like quickly jumping to conclusions, just like sometimes Mother Nature does, or the laws of physics do when you stumble down the stairs, and being angry or eliminating some whole planet or a whole person or some sentient being. And Shiva became angry, and it upset Parvati, who is
constantly
his
having
beloved.
him get angry.
Yeah. This is up in the mountains.
Yeah, they had
it's
it
not on
hard.
the planet Earth. Okay. And anyway, she got a little bit pissed at him, and which is kind of because he was pissed at everybody and doing all this. And so she arranged for him to take this excessively quick side and to be reincarnated in the form of a sage named Durvasa. And this required, many, many mountains of stories. But Durvasa means, and he was born as a very talented, divine, eccentric sage, but who had a big ego.
A little bit of a narcissist. I
Yeah, he was kind of a narcissist, but he was also divine.
And his name
Was Durvasa.
Yeah.
And Dur means, Dur is difficult, and Vasa is to live somewhere. And so he was really difficult to live with. If you were related at all, if you're in the house, or if it turns out if you even talk to him for, a few minutes, he was pretty obnoxious because he was a little bit, he knew that he was special.
And in Ashtanga Yoga, and in yoga in general, there's a posture called Durvasana.
Durvasasana.
Durvasasana.
Yes.
And it's the one where you put your leg behind your head and stand up, right, which is a hard pose to live in. So it all makes sense.
Yeah. You put one leg behind, you stand up and go like this, or you curse someone. Yeah. And so what happened was this funny story that Indra was doing his thing, riding around on his elephant, and he was actually, doing his duty good, which is the chief of the gods. And Durvasa had, through many mantras and through excellent yoga practice, gotten a special garland to fall out of the sky from the apsaras, or the divine angels, and he was going to give it to Indra, as a gift, and just to see what would happen. And so this extremely fragrant garland, which is what the leg behind his head represents, he's wearing a garland. He goes up to Indra, who's on his elephant, and Indra loves his elephant, and the elephant, this is like, I don't know how many heads that elephant had, and he offers the garland, which is extraordinarily fragrant. If you want to do breathing up into the sphenoid sinus, breathing, you get this garland. And he offers it to Indra, who's sitting on his elephant, and the elephant smells it. And Indra, who's riding along, doing his job, says, "Oh, here, I'll give it to my elephant." And in some stories, he hangs it over the tusk of the elephant, and in others, he hooks it on the elephant's nose. And whichever story you like, you take it. And then and Durvasa, right there, becomes like slightly offended, because he had given this to Indra, and Indra was supposed to fall at his feet and sing praises to him, and so he was already pissed off. And then what happened was the elephant, who, was Durvasa considered to be a sacred, but an animal, yuck, and all of a sudden it was so fragrant that swarms and swarms of honeybees came around the garland and started harassing the elephant, who reared up and flipped out, and so the garland actually fell, and Durvasa was extremely offended that his garland, and so he cursed Indra to lose all of his ability, his powers, basically. And so Indra's net no longer was the jeweled net of Indra, but it was the net of mirrors for narcissism. And so people would get involved with Indra or any of his gods, which were like Varuna and Agni and all of the old, normal, kind of scary and important environmental controllers. And what would happen then is the gods and Indra lost the ability to see the asuras, who are the people, the low life, the shadow people, the scary gods, or the monsters with, and to see them as their own shadows, but he actually saw them as enemies. And so they started having all these wars in which the gods were losing to the demons. And so the demons were actually taking over the whole universe and doing their demonic thing, which is, some kind of, we just went through the holidays here, so we can imagine. And this is where all of a sudden, what happened then was all the beings in the universe started crying, and the gods were totally afraid, and it looked as if it was the end of time, because the demons were in the process of just like enjoying killing others, because that's what they do. Yeah. They're kind of like, certain political entities that we can think of. And the solution came, and the solution came because they went to Vishnu and they said, Vishnu, actually, you are the heart of all these beings. And Vishnu was, what can we do? And he goes, and he said, you have to make, so he told the gods and the demons, who were also like kind of understanding that they were destroying the universe, what you have to do is you have to work together, which is like, Oh my God. You have to communicate with each other, work together, make careful plans, and you have to then take care of the difficulty in the universe by churning the ocean. It's called churning the ocean of milk in order to make amrita, which is nectar. And nectar, amrit, means no death. And so it's salvation from the truth or the fact of impermanence is no longer going to scare you. And so they started this fantastic process.
This myth or this visualization, this myth of Indra and the net and the visualization of the net really points to both interconnectedness and the importance of that, and to the insight into the truth of impermanence and the importance of that, both of which are the roots of suffering.
Yeah, and if you identify through the ego function, if you identify with your body, which is kind of natural, at least biologically, or you identify even with your mind, then the fact that everything is impermanent can be scary. Or if you flip mental states, it can also be like, wow, that's good news. And so the practice then of churning the ocean is to actually get a taste of the nectar. And what happened, the first thing that happened is, anyway, they got the gods on one end of the, and so they found a manifestation of the divine serpent, Nagaraj, Vishnu's friend, one of his versions, who had a number of heads that belched flowers and were flames, not flowers. That was later. And wearing these crowns and radiant. And then it had one tail, because it's a genuine serpent. And they wrapped it 3.5 times around Mount Meru, which is the mountain at the center channel of the universe. So this isn't the planet Earth, by the way. And so they got Mount Meru, and they threw it into the causal ocean, which was called the ocean of milk, because you churn milk to make butter. So it's very Indian. And it sank, and so Vishnu incarnated as a turtle, and he came and supported it on the center of his back, and they fixed it up. And the demons, having huge egos, okay, because they were in the entitled class somehow, we think, oh, that's the gods, but no, it was actually the asuras were the ones who were into entitlement, and they insisted on taking the heads of the serpent because that was classy, because the tail of the serpent is where poop came out, okay, which is called shesha, or residue, okay. And the gods were still very clever and smart, and they go, okay. So they took the tail, which, had poop coming out, but it didn't have flames birching and split-tongued serpents. And so they started churning the ocean. And the first thing to happen was all of a sudden out of the ocean came the residue or the sludge or all of the things about the universe and life that had slid out of the mental categories of the reductionists' approach due to ignorance. And it turns out that everything slips out of thought categories. And even though you can make categories for your thoughts and say, oh, those are all thoughts, and you make a basket called thoughts, and all the thoughts slip out of it quickly because you can't put the category thought into the category thought. And this is true for everything. So, and it's true environmentally. It's just like, it's true in physics. It's true in philosophy. It's just everything actually slides out as sludge or shesha. And no one had been dealing with it ever since Indra and the gods lost their correct position and function in the universe. So there was a ton of it. And so it started to rise up out of the ocean when they first started churning. And all of the gods and all of the demons started to get sick, just like sometimes the air quality in, I know in the States.
Smoke from fires or toxic chemicals.
Toxic
from burning.
chemicals, it's just like, ugh. And so it was very scary, and they didn't know what to do. And Vishnu was up there, like, he kind of like was, And so Shiva, who, he said, oh, and Shiva is known for kind of liking dirty things. He smears himself with cremation ash, and he's kind of the residue man. And so what he did is he went down to the beach next to the ocean, and he started to take in, and he started actually to drink the residue. And this was like oceans of it, but somehow, being who he is, he could drink, endless amounts of it. And he started to drink it and drink it and drink it and drink it. And and there are different stories here, but actually he would take it in, but he didn't swallow it, because he had in this chakra of the throat, right where the vocal cords are, he had what is called infinite space. Okay, so this is the element of infinite. And so he could just allow the ocean of residue, of stinky yuck, to collect there. And in one story, because he didn't swallow it, his throat turned blue. In other versions there are many versions of the story, Parvati was there, and she saw that he had just swallowed, this extremely unpleasant poison and residue. And she went up and she said, "No, you don't." And she grabbed him, and she started she wouldn't let him swallow. And so it was from her gently choking him that his throat turned blue. And so from this day on, he's called Nilakanta, or the blue-throated one. And he actually then they could begin the business of yoga practice, which is the churning of the ocean and the creation of the magic nectar, which turns out to be the nectar of discriminating awareness, and discriminating awareness turns out to be non-different from love or bhakti. Intelligence, that's what it is. It's and a humor, and which allows you to make up stories about things. So
it all, like you're thinking, why does this have anything to do with
practicing
why we practice for others? But these are these wonderful stories, these visual images that you can absorb, that really teach you, in a sense, in unspoken ways, about what it feels like to have this sense of pure connection to others, and what it feels like, which happened, in the story of the churning of the ocean, to not have that, where they were, at first not cooperating, at first saying, "I'm not going to take the end with the poop coming out," and so they through connecting to others against their own will, in a sense, through working together, they were able to bypass or get beyond, get beyond what life is normally about, which is the idea that you are not connected, that you are separate, that the mind constantly falls back into this idea. So that's how, when you look at this idea of offering the good from your practice to others, this story is very, sort of compelling in that sense. And it shows also how you are, when you do connect with others, what an impact that has. If you imagine being out on a ship with a net, a fish net, that hopefully you're not going to use to trap fish, but you're just enamored by the net, you notice that you just move one little piece of it, and the whole thing has some sort of reverberation that goes on within the net.
Yeah, you adjust one juncture and...
Yeah. We sit at this cafe in Thailand when we're there, and there are ships that come in, and the people who work the boats are fishermen, and you see them just meticulously adjusting something at one end and then rushing to the next end and adjusting it down there. And this is this real feeling that you can embody through this visualization, that you also embody through your own physical experience of having fascia connecting you everywhere. And dedicating the benefit of your practice, dedicating the feeling that may have come up where you experience spontaneously this sense of your story fading into the background and you disappearing. When you dedicate the practice, whether or not you actually experience that in that particular practice, you're reminding yourself, oh yeah, what I do matters. It connects to the person at the far end of the net. They can see it reflected at the far end of the net of Indra.
And in terms of just like our regular yoga practice, the idea of the dedication is you're dedicating it to, of course, all beings everywhere, but it's hard to think of all beings. You often will think of at least some you actually know nearby. And so the more you're present with your actual environment, then the more you actually benefit that environment. In other words, you'll actually do something in relation to maybe, you're not Durvasa, so you might have roommates or people in your family, or but you'll actually do things. And in relation to your environment, you'll maybe go outside if the weather permits, and you'll actually interconnect, because you'll see, because you're seeing everything all of a sudden as being this amazing net. And so you're able to take care of your immediate environment, and that might even involve human beings, or it might involve, nature and bunny rabbits and puppies, or birds, or environmental problems. And you'll actually do what's necessary, because letting go in Indra's net, you start to see that all of the levels of the function of mind, starting with the ego function, which is the basis of the manifestation, are sacred and divine, but they're not you. And that's the hard thing. The ego function is special. All of these avatars, the Vishnus and Shivas, they have very strong ego functions, but it's not really them, because they are this unspeakable, and they see through it, and they're able to use the ego function, and then all of the subcategories of that, like, plans and immediate natural response to environment. And your yoga can actually help you do that. And so you can actually, once you're officially off of the mat, unless you see the whole world as your mat, then you can actually interact with people.
That's a revolutionary idea.
Yeah, I'm going to try it sometime. and, in a way that's nice. And you're not sure exactly what to do. Just like in ordinary, you're walking down the street, there's somebody with, who's miserable, and you don't know exactly what's going to help them. And you try something, and sometimes it's the wrong thing. It makes them worse, but because you actually care, you'll listen to feedback. It's like,
yeah. And so a huge part of this process is the sincerity that you have in the idea of offering your presence, or the good from your practice, the sincerity that you have in offering that, as both a connection to others and as a support to others, as something that shows the other person that even if they don't feel the sense of connectedness that is part of being alive, that you do, and that because you do, just a little bit of that residue of what you are sincerely feeling when you are not offering because you think it's good merit, going to get you good merit, or not offering because you think it's the right thing to do, but you're offering because
you like them.
You feel connected to them.
Even if, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Even if they're not that likable.
Yeah. And to even like something, you have to have some part of you that feels connected to that, whatever it is you're liking. And then to remember always that we all have this problem with the ego function, with the ego making stories about ourselves, and it becomes a problem only when we don't see through it. Because if we didn't have an ego, that would be a bigger problem.
Well, time and space would actually stop, technically.
Well, it might not be a bigger problem. I haven't tested it yet.
Right, depends on whose ego we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to let go. So when in Indra's net, when you let go, you're not thinking about. It's no longer you're lost in the mirror of narcissism. You're seeing and you completely forget about, me.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point in time, you might have to say, this thing which is theoretically me is, how can I, put that to use?
Yeah.
And
so one, as we do these talks, one of the things that we like to do is to look at how these things come up in our own lives. So we do our yoga practice, and we end it with offering the closing chant or offering the goodness to others. And then we start, when we do the practices, the mindfulness practices more and more and more, we start to notice when the sincerity is not there, when we're either behaving in a sort of rote manner or in a sort of preconceived manner rather than a heartfelt manner. And as we were thinking about this idea of why we practice for others, and hopefully this has shed some light on it, that it really is this act of generosity, this act of reminding yourself of connection to others, reminding yourself that whatever you do or you say or even what you think, that has an impact through this interconnectedness. But that to remind yourself also that it is the nature of being human for the mind to hear what the story is that you have, and to believe that story from the ego. That's the nature of what it is to be human. Mm-hmm. And so when you recognize that you do that you are doing that, or when you recognize that you're not feeling a sense of living in a sort of integrated way within your own embodied experience, it can be interesting to reflect on what you are experiencing in your physical body, in your, heartfelt sense of being in the world, and in your mind. Like, what is going on in there? And to just observe it when you're not feeling connected, or if you're feeling imbalanced or upset or whatever. And to notice ways in which you propagate the story of being separate, or propagate the idea that you do not want to be connected to others, or do not reach out to others. And you can look at physically how you might do that by, tensing up your body or turning in space and not really connecting to others. But I was thinking this morning when I practiced even, that there are ways we get out of our sort of more fluid, interconnected body. Because if you don't have an interconnected, embodied sense of yourself, it's almost impossible to be interconnected with the world, because you're dominated by your physical body, the sensations, or your heart, your emotions, or your mind states. But when you're more integrated, then you can integrate with others. And then you can have this sense of giving the goodness that you yourself have. You can have that sincerity that's there. But I was thinking this morning about even ways we do our yoga, where we might shrug our shoulders up and close our, the heart area when we're doing something simple like Padangusthasana.
Right.
And
or clench our teeth.
Yeah. and how that then, the shesha, the residue from that, is reflected in then the rest of the day, how we're interfacing with others. And so giving away the good from your practice has, if that sort of thing is happening for you, giving away the goodness allows that to sort of mellow out when you are carrying embodied parts of separateness around with you. And we do it with our hearts, where we close off from others emotionally, or we do it in our minds when we, when we make stories up about other people or about ourselves. So one way of really checking yourself is to tap in. How are you not being integrated in an embodied way in those areas of physical body, breath, heart, and mind?
Right, so you're going back to sensation, to breath and sensation, because everything you think, particularly about others, other people, or it's reflected in sensation, and you kind of carry them all around. And if you're practicing, then you just notice, and then you don't. It's just like if you become, excited or greedy as you practice. Like, if I practice, then I'm going to become a billionaire, or I guess a trillionaire is now the goal.
I don't know.
Yeah, it keeps going up, and or if or you start to see that you're actually angry. You have all this suppressed anger, and your practice, because your body is now like saying, "Oh, this is what you're really thinking at the moment," and you don't have to get rid of it. You just have to, if you return to the breath, then you can see it in relation just to sensation, and you can go, and or if you become, again, that cycle. I'm angry at my anger, then all of that. But that is reflected also in posture and breath.
Yeah.
And
so you see it and you know this is natural. And then you realize, this is the other part of it, that you realize that that's going on for everyone else. They're stuck in their stories of their small self. They are stuck in their habitual physical and mental and emotional patterns of behavior and expression that keep them separate. And so when you see that, that is very, very powerful. And then when you look at yourself interfacing with others, and you notice the fact that you are not listening, that you are not really looking deeply at them, that you are imposing your views of what you think the world is or should be, or who they should be, or etc., etc. That is an extension of all of this sort of separation from ourselves, from our physical experience of, and our embodied experience of interconnectedness. And so this idea of reminding yourself to offer insight, to offer, anything that is a seed of truth that might have come up throughout the day or in your actual, on the mat, on the cushion practice, if you cultivate that capacity to offer that goodness to others, what it does is it breaks down the barriers of separateness. And as much as anything, it breaks them down within yourself.
So you're actually using your own unique religious tendencies, because you think, well, I want to, and I'm offering happiness to all beings, and you have your own kind of view of what that is, and then you kind of think of all beings, and you think of
what that is,
what they are, and you have categories of really nice beings that you're offering it to, beings and everyone does that, and so, but these are things that kind of, you can almost feel that they're a little bit inspiring, and then gradually as you keep practicing, they become redefined until finally it starts working.
Yeah. So this idea of offering it really is a reset button, in a sense, to check back in to something before the imagination has taken over. And then also, as we said in the beginning, a gesture of seeing others in terms of being generous, offering, something very precious to others. And if you think about and consider what it would be like in this world if more people offered goodness, just even a seed of goodness, you might not have had a very good day or a good, period of time or a good practice. But if there's one thing that happened, and instead of saying, well, at least, I didn't break my foot in that posture today, if instead of saying, well, that's mine to keep, saying, at least I'm offering that to others, then it starts this sort of momentum of building connection, of building a place where we feel really truly like we belong together.
Yeah, and it's giving honest feedback to others.
Yeah.
It might not always be, but they need to know, because they're all scientists in the best sense of the word. And you need to know, get feedback from them, because you're a scientist looking for something that's essentially quite exciting.
Yeah.
Should
Yeah.
we offer?
So we hope this has shed a little light on it for you. And we hope we offer whatever goodness has come from this, that it may help someone. And we appreciate the sense of connection that we all get from sort of churning ideas like this around together, as they did churning the ocean, to churn things around and get the jewels that come out of it. So we hope that was helpful. Richard is going to chant a little bit, offering
Swasti. So, to all Prajabhya, so those who have been born. So it starts out with embodied beings, those who have been born in any of the realms, subtle or, gross bodies, and all over the place. And then it gets...
May they be.
May they be happy. Yeah. Om Swasti Prajabhya Paripalayantam Nayena Margena Mahim Mahisha Go Brahmanebhya Shubham Astu Nityam Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you.